Hello there, welcome to the Introduction to HTML and CSS workshop. My name is Brian and I'm joined with John to show you a brief introduction to HTML and CSS. So what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it is a language used to display text on websites, and all websites actually use this language. HTML, why is HTML useful? HTML is used for all websites. It displays text, and it determines the structure of the content of the website. So the syntax in HTML is easy. All the information you want to put in your website goes in the HTML elements. An HTML element is defined by a start tag, the content, and an end tag. And here's an example. So you have the tag name, you have the content, and you have an end tag, which is a tag name started by a slash. So an example would be an H1 tag. So as you can see, you have the H1 tag, your content, and the end tag. So here's the structure of an HTML document. A lot of this you actually don't need to know and is more of a copy and paste kind of thing. However, I'll go over it. Doc type HTML. This declaration defines that this document is an HTML5 document. HTML is a root element of the HTML page as shown here, HTML tag name and the end tag. You have HTML and then end HTML tag here. And this is the content in between those tags. And the head tag contains meta information about the HTML page. And so this stuff you don't really need to worry about too much. However, this you do have to worry about. Title, this specifies the title for your HTML page. So as you can see, if you here, the HTML and CSS workshop, HTML and CSS, this is basically what the title determines. And this links to your CSS, links to your style sheet. And body is where we're going to be doing the majority of our coding in. So headings, a very crucial part of HTML is headings. HTML headings are titles or subtitles on the page. And for HTML headings, the smaller the number, the larger the font. So for instance, H1, H2, H3, and here you can see the size difference. And for the more advanced people, and for people who kind of know what HTML and CSS is going for, the reason why you would actually want to use headings is for SEO, search engine optimization. When it comes to paragraphs or any other tags, you can make it look like this if you really wanted to with CSS. However, when you want to rank higher on the Google search results and when people search for keywords, you most likely want it in a heading so the Google would know what the page is about. However, I do not know the Google algorithm on searching that much, so I don't feel qualified to go too deep into it. But yeah, the H1 tag does help with search engine optimization. So this is a paragraph tag. A P tag indicates a paragraph. A paragraph always starts on a new line. And the browser automatically adds some white space before and after a paragraph. So for instance, this is a P tag, this is the end tag, and this is the content in between. And as you can see, there's space here. And a problem with HTML, and for a lot of beginners, is how white space is not displayed. What I mean is you can have a P tag, and you can have content with a lot of space in between. However, this does not show up in the browser. This is the output. As you can see, you can have enters, you can press enter, go to a new line, whatever, but the code always has just one space in between each word. The output always has one space in between each word. So the source code does not automatically translate to the output. So formatting text. There are a lot of ways you can format text in HTML, and you don't really need to memorize these. Just search it up when you need them. And truth be told, I didn't know some of these existed before this. And for instance, this is just bold text. And then obviously you would need the end tag too, and just have the content in between, just like here. But however, just use B instead of P. And yeah, so basically this is just a bunch of different ways you can show your text. And you can always just search these up and you don't need to memorize these. So let's go into inline CSS, styling. Inline CSS is when you put CSS in HTML code. Notably, this is not recommended, and you probably want to separate the styling and logic and the structure of the content of the website. So you want to separate your content into a CSS file, an HTML file, and a JavaScript file if you have logic with the JavaScript file. You don't really want it in the same place. However, here's an example of it being in the same place. For instance, here's an H1 tag. I just go style equals color blue. So I'm telling it style, which is inline CSS. Color, I'm telling it the text color to be blue. And here you can see a blue heading. MP, oops, I did not do that correctly. Style color red. And then you can see this is a red paragraph. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, please just talk in chat, and I'm monitoring it. And if I'm talking too fast, I apologize, and just tell me to slow down. So the div element is used as a container for other HTML elements. And it is really powerful when you use it with CSS. The div element can be used to style blocks of content. So for instance, as you can see, we have background color black. So here's the background color. Color white. So that we set the font color to white with 100%. So it fills 100% of the parent element, or the, or I'm not going to go too deep into that because John would go deeper into that with the CSS. And height 100% basically is kind of the same thing. And as you can see, we separate it with semicolons to separate different rules. And yeah, we have other elements in the div. So this is just one block, one chunk of information, or one chunk of content, I guess. The image tag can be used to show images. And as you can see, we just have image source equals whatever the URL of the image is. And you can get URLs on Google Images. Just go to Google Images and just copy and paste the URL. And yeah, here's the result. And external links. Sometimes you want your website to link to other web pages, and that's when A tags are really useful. The A tags are simple HTML elements to display links. And links are crucial for leading users to certain pages. And we use href as a value parameter that takes in the link that you wish to lead others to. For instance, href, and then the link, visit w3schools.com. And then when you click on this link, you go to w3schools.com. So as you can see, that's the content, and href does that. And when you have links, some default styles are applied to it, and you would want to use CSS or inline CSS to remove the default styling, because the default styling would have an underscore and then make the text blue. So we're going to classes and IDs. And if you've learned what a class is in an object-oriented programming language, HTML classes are a little bit different. HTML classes and IDs are used in HTML to allow other languages like CSS and JavaScript to recognize HTML. For instance, you have a class here, H1 class, H1, and then you have a span here. This is just another element. And we just have a class note. So basically, when I'm in my CSS and I want to recognize this element, I'll just use dot note, and John will go deeper into that. And you can have one element with multiple classes, just separate them by a space, as you can see here. So we have note and main classes for the span. And it's the same for ID, but however, instead of using class, you just use ID. And John will take over this section. Hello, John.
So let's go deeper into CSS. So what is CSS? So CSS is cascading style sheets, and we saw that in the HTML that once you put in like paragraph tags or button tags, you pretty much get just a basic button or text. And what we want to do is actually make it look good using CSS. So what we can do is actually connect it with HTML and add colors, font styles, and stuff like that. So why is CSS useful? CSS is what makes everything look good on a website. So if you look at any websites, it basically, all the colors, all the stylings are created by CSS. So looking at the syntax, let's look at the first box. So this is how it's going to be. This is how we are going to connect HTML with CSS. So there's 3 ways we can connect HTML with CSS. So the first way is by referencing HTML elements by their tag names. So if you look at the above 2 P tags above, you can see that all we're doing to connect the HTML tags to CSS is just calling P, because that's the tag name. So if we had a button tag, then we just reference button and then we put 2 brackets, and inside those brackets will just be containing all the styles that we need. So that can be color red, width, height, and stuff like that. And so what this will do is actually select every paragraph tag inside your HTML. Now, sometimes we don't want to do that because we want to conditionally style some elements. We want to be able to choose which HTML tags to style. So then there's 2 other ways we can do that. First is giving an ID attribute. So what it looks like is, as Brian discussed before, if you think about class and IDs, that you can give like class note or class or ID note, and from that we can just take out that ID and just interpolate it into CSS. So to call ID attributes, we put a hashtag, and all we're going to do is put the name of the ID attribute. So then we don't have to style every single HTML element. We can just render only the element that has the ID attribute. And for classes, it works the same, except we put a dot in front of the name of the attribute. So moving on to background. Background is just going to style literally the background of the web page. So, or whatever element you decided to style. So in this case, all we're doing is basically taking the body tag, and as you can see, we're putting 2 brackets, and we're saying background color to light blue. So what the body tag is pretty much the entire content. So what it means is that you're going to style this entire web page with light blue. So moving on to colors. Color is a little bit confusing because it can be similar to background color, but you'll realize that it's not. So we see that background color is black, which is again setting the web page to black, and there's color. And make sure you don't mix these up because they're completely different. So what color does is actually change the styles of the fonts and the text only. So it's not, if you put color white, that's not going to do anything to the web page or the background. That's only going to change the text. So as you can see inside the body, there's color white, and what that's going to do is basically take this body tag, and every text inside that body tag will be transforming into the color white. So next is width, height, and borders. So this is where things get interesting. So we have a container, we have a division of container that has a class of container, and there's text inside. So if you look at the CSS, we're referencing the class with dot container because we gave it a class attribute. We're putting 2 brackets, and then we're saying height 50 pixels. So what height 50 pixels does is add a 50 pixel height to the element. So that's going to be the vertical line, right? And with 100%. So 100% in this case means you're taking the entire width of the web page. So that's going to stretch the element from the start of the web page to the end of the web page. And lastly, we have border, and border takes in 3 values. So the length, so the thickness of the border, and then the style of the border. So this is solid right now, but it can be like dotted if you want to. And then it takes in color. So in this case, it takes in a color code, but you can also just put like white, black, or green. So as you can see, we have a 1 pixel thick border with solid lines and with a green color. Okay, moving on with margins. So margins can be kind of confusing at first, and essentially they're just ways to create space around elements. And so let's break this down. So in the HTML, we have an ID attribute inside a container, and there's text. And again, we created a border. But now we gave it a margin. So what that's going to do is imagine that this black border is the web page. And what margin does is basically take this container, and it allows the container to push away from the actual web page. So that's going to create space around the container. So, and there's other types of margins as well, such as margin right, margin left, margin bottom, and margin top. And simply, they're just different dimensions. So in this case, margin applies, oh, it should be 70 pixels, but applies 70 pixels around the entire container. So the top, it applies 70 pixels of space in the top, in the left, in the right, and the bottom. But what if we just want space on the top? Then simply we just put margin top. And if we want space on left and right, then we just do margin left and right. Now moving on to paddings. Paddings are a little bit different. So they also create space, but instead of space around the element, they create a space inside the element. So as you can see, you have the same division and with the attribute of hello. So we reference it using hashtag hello. And in this case, we put a padding of 70 pixels. So as you can see, comparing it to the margin, there's actually space inside the container. So now what this is doing is basically taking the container and saying, okay, I want the information inside the container to push away from its own container. So by putting 70 pixels, you're saying this content inside of this container. So this element has a padding of 70 pixels. That text is you want that to push out of its own container. So that's what padding does. Now moving on to the last part, which is the most confusing in this workshop, is a flexbox. So flexboxes is a layout model that allows elements to align and distribute space within a container. And why this is useful is that it's used for responsive design. And I'll get to that later. But basically, as you can see from the result, we want to center it on the web page. So we want to locate the element dead center. So what we would do instead of using margins is that we would basically take the class and then we put a display flex, and that's going to declare the element to be displayed flex, and you're declaring it to be a flexbox. And flexbox, they have a lot of values that can be put in. But today we're only going to be looking at justify content and align items because they're the most used. And this is where it can be a little bit confusing. But let's look at justify content for a second, right? What justify content does is basically move the content inside the container around the X position only. So what would happen is that if you put justify content and you put center, you're going to move the content to the center in a horizontal position. And then align items would be the vertical position. So if I do align item center, that's going to move my element vertically. And you can see that that's happening right now. So you're basically doing justify content center to move that element in a horizontal position to the center. And then you're bringing it down to the dead center by saying align item center, which moves it vertically. And as you can see at the bottom, I have some models. And these are just models for imagination. And when you work with flexboxes, for a beginner, it's really hard to imagine it in your head where the element is going to move, but that's very crucial. So as you can see, the first model of this like XXX has that's just center, right? You're just moving the element in a horizontal position to be centered. And then there's space around and space between. So what space around does is just basically space the elements, the three elements evenly, but you're also putting a space around them. Now, how is space between different? Well, you're not putting a space around them, and you're only putting space between the elements. And this is really useful if you're going for design that you want 3 consecutive boxes that you want to align it equally. And align items is nothing different. It takes in the same thing, except what's different about this is that it's vertical. The last thing is flex direction, and we haven't used it in the example, but the main thing to understand when you're using flex direction is that you can put a row value or a column value. And the main concept that you have to understand when you're using flex direction is that if you put a row, then justify content is responsible for the horizontal movement, and align items is responsible for the vertical movement. When you do flex direction column, the roles switch. So instead of align items taking in the vertical position, the align items switch to horizontal positions, and justify content switch and is responsible for the vertical position. So this is really hard to understand at first, but it's really helpful to actually try these out on Replit or your coding ID. And yeah, that's the basics of CSS. And now I'll pass on to Brian so that he can actually give a practical example of how to code a landing page.
Hello, so we're going to be making this or something similar to it. And John will actually show you how to make it, how to start a Replit account, because we're going to be using Replit to be making this page.
Okay, so you go on Replit, and then all you're gonna do is first of all click sign up. And here you can log in with three different like social media. So Google, GitHub, and Facebook. And you can make a Replit account, but you can choose anything. So I just go in with Google, and then you would have to set up some information. But because Replit has like an automatic login, I can't show you that. So once you're on this page, all you're gonna do is basically click new REPL. And in this case, there's a lot of languages that you can use, but because we're learning HTML, CSS, just select this one, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and just name it whatever you want. So let's say web development practice. So, and then you just create REPL. So then the file structure is that you get index.html, script JS, and then style CSS. And you're just gonna apply your knowledge here. So now Brian will show you in his Replit how to make a landing page.
Yeah, so first thing I want to note is when you make a landing page, there's something called the media queries that we have to keep in mind. So basically, when you go to a website, to make it responsive on all different screen sizes, because when we use something like pixels, like 48 pixels, that will look a lot different when you have different screen sizes, right? If you have a phone, 48 pixels might be a lot, and if you have a computer, 48 pixels might not be that much. So for instance, here's the code we had, we coded, and depending on your screen size, it might look like this, which does not look that good. And how we deal with it is using media queries, but that's a little bit out of the scope of our workshop today. However, you can definitely search that up and try it out yourself. And basically, what media queries do is it basically says if the screen size is this, we use these styles instead of the styles before. So instead of using that, for instance, 48 pixels with a media query, it would go like, hey, if the screen size is 700 pixels, we would be using 50 pixels, for instance. And we can change a lot of these things depending on the media query. Okay, so let's get to coding it. So that's just a little disclaimer. The values we have chosen might not work that well on your screen. So let me change my screen share into this. I think it's the right one. Okay, yeah. I hope you guys can see my screen. And when it comes to programming a website, we usually look at the design, and we look at this and think to ourselves, what do we need? So first of all, we can see that there's a background, and there's a nav bar on top, and we know that to have an element on top of the other, we're going to have we're most likely going to deal with position fixed or things like that, or position absolute with like z indexes and etc. However, but since it's a napper, we're going to be using position fixed, and basically what that does is when you scroll, it follows your mouse. So yeah, and then so we basically kind of look at this and we think to ourselves what we're going to do. So yeah, so the top we're going to have a position fixed, and then it's gonna move with us. And for the background, we're just gonna have instead of having like a background image, we probably should have a background color instead. And there's text in the middle that looks like a button. So to me, it looks like two divs. It looks like one div for the nav bar and one div for this. So now let's program the HTML with that knowledge. So we know that we're going to have a div for nav bar, so we're just going to call it nav. And a shortcut for making a div with the class is dot, and then have the class name, and that will create a div, and it will give you a class equals blank. So that just speeds up the progress when you're coding. So let's actually make an h1 tag and have the name be nav header. I have a double underscore here, and it's just a little bit of styling that I'd like to follow. So if this is a parent element and this is a child element, I like to have a double underscore before the child element name. So when I code, this makes more sense to me. So I don't have random classes spilling all over the place. Yeah, that just makes the class names a little bit more understandable. And for the screenshot, we have Spotify here. However, we're just gonna call it Acme Productions because we can. Actually, let's just call it XdHacks Mini. Why not? There we go. And let's have and then we can see that this is on the left side and this is on the right side. So we're probably going to be using a Flexbox here for that. And when we look at this, we go like, hey, this is on the left side and this is on the right side. To use a Flexbox, we're going to make a container. So basically, this is part of the Flexbox, and we're going to have a container containing the other information. So we're just going to go nav links. So these are the links. And then we're just going to have a tags, a.nav. We can actually do something. Here's a cool little trick. If we go shift alt, oops, or sorry, command alt, if that would work, actually. If you go command alt and then you go down, and that's not working for me for some reason. There we go. Okay, yeah, it's not working for me for some reason. But if you go a dot, you can select multiple lines, and you go a dot nav links link to follow the style we had, and I'm just gonna make this look good. There we go. And now we just have a bunch of reference tags, if you remember from our slideshow. So we have a bunch of reference tags, and then we're just gonna have the class nav links link. So basically, as you can see, this is a parent. This is a parent class. This is a child class, and this is a child class of the child class. And yeah. So you don't need to follow these naming or these rules for naming. Of course, you can name it anything you want. Like for instance, I could call this I don't know, like that. If I really wanted to. However, I like to call it this because it just makes it a lot more understandable when you read it later. So let's look at the screenshot again. So we have premium, help, download, sign up, login. So let's just go premium, and then we could go help, download, and then we can go sign up, and then login. And let's just see how this looks. Yeah, and that should look like that. And A tags actually don't have another line, as you can see. So these are just grouped together. And that's what that looks like. And let's make a container for the information for the body. So we're going to make a container for this. So as we can see, we have a music for everyone. So that's probably going to be a H1 tag. Millions of songs. We're probably going to have H2 tag there, and this is a button, so we're going to use a button tag. So to do that, we're just going to do dot container. You can name it anything you want, or dot content, which is probably going to be better. H1. And we're just not going to give this a class name because I'm a little bit lazy. Music for everyone. And in a real life, like if you're programming to make this, if you're going to make this like a really professional website, you probably should give it a name, a tag, a name, class. We're just gonna do H2, and then we're gonna go millions of songs, and then we're gonna have a button. There we go, and we're gonna have learn more. And let's see how this looks. As you can see, this looks kind of like that, and that's not how we want it to look. So as you can see, the HTML, we have just specified the content in our page, and then we have kind of structured it a little bit. We have said this is on top, this is on the bottom. Of course, you can change this all with CSS, but this is just like the logic. And oh, a short note, you can put comments in HTML like this. And then we can go like, hey, this is the nav bar. And basically, this does not show up in our code. So if we run it, and if we let it run, I think it's running. I can't tell because this does not affect our code at all. This would not affect the output at all. This is just for when you have when you're working with other people, you want to show them what this is, right? You want to show them, hey, this is an app bar. Hey, don't touch this, for instance, or like, hey, this logic is blah 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 blah. And you might want a comment there to tell other people or to remind yourself in the future, because a lot of times when you code, you come back to the code, you have no clue what you were thinking like a few days ago. And this is really important. Yeah. So now let's go to styles.css. And the reason why I can edit the HTML in the CSS, well, yeah, style the HTML in the CSS is because of this line here. Link href styles.css and blah, 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 blah. I just linked the CSS to the HTML. And as you can see, this is the link to JavaScript in the body tag, script source JavaScript. You can put this in the head tag with another kind of command kind of thing. But yeah, I won't go into that. So let's actually style it. Let's go to CSS. So let's give it some root styles, or like styles that go over everything. So margin 0. So you want to make sure that there's no margins. Padding 0. And basically this makes sure that there are no margins and paddings unless if we give it to them. And box sizing, inherit. And something really interesting about really, well, this is really bad part about, oh, sorry, there's chat. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't reading chat, sorry. Yeah, and something really triggering about HTML or like web development is that there are different browsers, and the browsers have different for some browsers, some commands don't work or rules don't work. And to ensure that the rules work, you have to go like Moz box sizing, and you have to memorize these. Like this is like you probably wouldn't be able to do. Yeah, these are stuff you can just search up. Probably don't memorize, but you have to search up. And yeah, I'm just gonna put these like simple commands, and this is stuff I memorize. Well, copy and paste. I don't. Yeah, so I'm just gonna skip over that a little bit, and we're just gonna go to .nav. So if you see, we have a nav class here. We're just gonna go .nav to access the nav class here. So nav.nav. And so, like I said, this is a nav bar, so we probably want to have it positioned fixed. And I'll show you what it kind of does. Position fixed. And there we go. As you can see, it kind of just goes on top of everything. And if we can scroll, which let me just make it so that we can scroll. Let's give it a height of, I don't know, 500 view height, and that will allow me to scroll. it stays with me. You see how this nav bar stays with me even as I scroll? So this is the content, right? This is the content. I know you can't really see that now that it's everywhere. Let's actually give the content, if I remember the thing correctly, a margin top of 500 pixels. Let's see how that looks. That's not working. Oh, container. That's what I called it. Oops. Hopefully that works. If I can run it. And yeah, I haven't. Yeah. It seems like the margin top has actually affected the nav for some reason, and I'm just not going to deal with that right now. But basically, as you can see, margin top, you have you have space on top of that, as you can see. I'm wondering why actually. If I go top 500 pixels, would that help? Yeah. So here's the nav bar again, and yeah, so there we go. So we just go like, hey, this is just compared to top 500 pixels, and then we have the nav bar there. As you can see, so this is what position fix does. If I scroll, as you can see, I'm scrolling, this just stays there. So for instance, if you look at, what's a good example? If you look at YouTube mobile, when you scroll, you always have the nav bar on the bottom, right? You always have the nav bar. That's because it's position fixed. Yeah, that's basically what that does. Or like YouTube, you have like, for instance, if I scroll here, for instance, in YouTube, when you scroll, you have something like this, right? And even when you scroll, this always stays there. That's because it's position fixed. And yeah, so don't mind these commands or rules yet. We would go into that. Okay, so let's run that. So this is what it kind of looks like, and that does not look that good. So let's actually remove that. We don't want the height to be that large, and then there's no scroll anymore. Okay. So we want the height for 48 pixels. You can have the height as anything, but I'm just going to give it a height of 48 pixels. So basically that gives the nav a height of 48 pixels. It doesn't change much yet. And we're just going to give it a width. Oops, width of 100%. So basically that gives it width of 100% against you. Again, you can't see it. Let me actually have a background color. So you can see what this is kind of looking like. And let me just go display none. So basically what this does is it stops this from displaying. So basically that stops that from displaying, and the background color shows you what I've done. So without these, that's what it looks like. So if I give it a width of 100 pixels, sorry, 100%, which is just 100% of the parent element, and in the case it's a body. And let me just run this. So that goes all the way across the screen. Let me just give it a height of 48 pixels. As you can see, we'll make it smaller than the text because, it'll make it smaller than the text because the text is a little bit too big right now, but we will deal with that a little bit later. And actually, we don't want the red as a background color. So we can get another color. And good ways to get colors, just search for HTML colors. And you can go here. And yeah, and you can see how we have like RGB values. And then if we go to HTML color picker here, actually, we can pick different colors. Like we can pick that, and then we have the color code here. And then this is actually not that good of a website to be using. Actually, is this better? Yeah, here. So we can have this, right? And we can see the hex code. And I don't know if this shows the RGB code, huh? Does it? Oh yeah, here it goes. Here shows the RGB A code. The A stands for alpha. So that's basically how transparent the color is. And let's just choose a gray here. So let's do 46, 46, 46, 1. So oops, let's give it. So to do that, we just go RGBA 46, 46, 46, 1. And actually, I don't like to put spaces in between. I don't know why I did that. This is just a preference thing. Oops. There we go. And as you can see, it actually shows it here. But yeah, and now we change the color to that. However, if we look behind it, if we start displaying this, this goes on top and the gray covers out the background. And we don't want that. So let's make it transparent. So let's make it 0.5. That basically means 50% opacity if you guys use Photoshop or like any image editing software. This basically goes 50% opacity. And yeah, as you can see the back. If you can kind of see the back now. Let's just go display none so this doesn't bother us while we're coding. Again, you can play around with these heights and blah blah blah. For some reason, it's not running. Replit is kind of slow for some reason. Huh. Yeah, there we go. Jesus. Let's go display flex. And actually, well, let's play around with the Flexbox here. We could go, so basically flex direction row. We're gonna have this shown as a row. So as you can see, here in this is not on top of each other as seen here. As you can see, this is on top of each other. We don't want that. We want it as a row. So we're gonna go flex direction row, and that puts it beside each other. And now we're going to go justify content space and evenly. As you can see, you have space around, space between, blah, blah, blah. And as you can see, it spaces, there's a space here, there's a space here, and there's a space here. Everything is even here. We can go space around if you want to see what that looks like. And basically that spaces everything around. It doesn't look that much different, actually. We could go center, and that will look quite a bit different. Everything's shoved in the center. Yeah, you can play around with these values, but we're going to use space evenly today. So now it's spaced evenly. And now let's just play around with the line items, because right now it's spaced evenly. The X, for instance, the horizontal is how we want it. We want it to look like this. However, the vertical doesn't look that good. As you can see, the Spotify, though this is larger, everything is spaced in between. I don't know if I can zoom in here. Huh, I can't. But yeah, so you see how there's this, imagine if there's a line going through the center of that. It's going through the center. This is not above that. However, if we look at this, these are above the center line of that. And we don't want that. We want it to be not above. So we just go align items, center. And oops, I pressed stop. And if we run it, everything's centered, including the text actually. The text wasn't centered before. And the reason why it is centered, it's centered based on the height of 48 pixels. So center goes to the center of the height of 48 pixels. So everything in between is just 48 pixels, the center. Everything is centered now. Okay. Let's look at what we have. XdHacks Mini. So nav header. And the header is white and these are white. So let's actually give it a color of white. So to do that, let's go to styles. .nav. So we're going in nav bar here. Sorry, that .nav here. And we want to select this tag in the nav. So we can go .nav header. You don't necessarily need to put .nav there. You can have it like that. But it's good practice to go like, hey, parent, and this is child. Let's just give it a color of white. As you can see, the font is white now. Let's do this, and then we have the nav links here. Nav link. So let's actually do that too. So let's go .nav links .nav link. No, .nav links link. I think that's what I called it. If we look at the HTML, .nav links link. And that's what we have here. And let's go color white. Oops. Let's give it a margin. So margin, you could go margin top, margin right, margin blah, blah, blah. However, we can have a shortcut for that. Margin 0 pixels, 5 pixels, 0 pixels, 5 pixels. There's actually a shorter way to do this. I'm pretty sure it's just 0 pixels, 5 pixels if you want. I'm pretty sure you can do that too. But basically, let me explain this for a second. When you do this, you're going like margin top is 0 pixels, margin right is 5 pixels, margin bottom is 0 pixels, margin left is 5 pixels. So if we look at this right now, we have a margin left and a margin right here, as you can see, between each of these. So without this, let's actually comment that out. Oh yeah, and that's CSS comments. For some reason that's not working, huh? I don't know why REPL doesn't allow for like comments like this, but yeah, we're gonna be using these. So these are just CSS comments. As you can see, there's no margin here. As you can see, they're really jammed together. So by doing this, we basically put a margin between them. And of course, you can also do this. Margin, what's it called? Margin left, 5 pixels, margin right, 5 pixels. Just know that these are equal. Margin this is equal to that. These do the same thing. And yeah, let's do that. And as you can see, these links don't take us anywhere. And yeah, so and as you can see, there's like a underline there. We don't like that. So let's just go text decoration, none. That removes the underline. So let's see that. That will work. We have to wait for it a little bit. Yeah, that removes the underline, as you can see there. And let's actually make the container now. So so instead of dots display none, let's actually show the container now. So as you can see, a container is behind it. So this is a nav and this is a container behind it. Like I showed before, the nav is just, it will stick with you when you scroll. So now let's center the stuff in the container. So let's just go width, 100 view width. So basically view width and view height, if you see those values, that's just saying 100 of the width of the view. So 100 of the view of the user screen. And height, let's just do 100 VH. Oops. And of course, if this doesn't look good to you, for some reason, if these don't look good to you, you can obviously just have like a smaller font size. Let's do font size like 10 pixels. I don't know what font size that is right now. And then as you can see, it'll look like that. So basically, like for instance, if you want to make it look good on smaller screens, you will have a media query and you'll go like, hey, for smaller screens, use a smaller font size. And basically that stops it from breaking so soon. And yeah, so let's remove that actually. And let's continue here. And I'm gonna speed up a little bit because we're a little bit close to time. So let's give it, let's go display flex again because I like flex boxes. And let's just justify content. Oh, flex, let's just justify content. And then we go center, align item center. That's just a way to center something. Oh, and notably, Flexboxes don't always work on modern browsers, and sorry, not modern browsers. Some Flexboxes don't always work on browsers. Like I'm pretty sure Internet Explorer doesn't allow Flexboxes, so you might need to use position. Here's a different way to center something: relative, left 50%, top 50%, transform. Let's go transform translate. Negative 50%, negative 50%. That's another way to center something. And let's actually comment this out to show you that it works like the same. However, if we're going to center something like that, that shouldn't be there. Yeah, and we would have to set like a body. We would have to give body height of 100 VH, width of 100 view width. Yeah, and this I kind of centers it because this is just the container I'm pretty sure goes 100% width or something like that. It doesn't always work properly. This is just like not how I like to do it, so I don't really care about it that much, to be honest. This is just a better way to do it. And yeah. So oh, we need to give it a height of 100 view height, the width of 100 view width. There we go. There we go. And so to make it a column, because Flexbox is default to rows, as you can see, this is a column. We just go, oops, we just go flex direction column. We now make it a column. Yeah, so now it's a column. Now let's actually give the container a background color because as you can see, there's this cool and pretty good looking background here. But instead of having a background image, we're just gonna give it a background color. So let's go background. Sorry, background, and let's just give it. And of course, you can play around with HTML colors here. However, I already have a color selected. Actually, I selected based on this image. And here's a cool thing you can have. You can install a Chrome plugin to choose your colors, and you can just, yeah, there we go. And that's really useful when you want to program and you have a cool color that you want to choose. It gives you the hex code and you just go like that, hashtag. And there we go. So now everything is set for the container. Now let's style these because we need to make that look better. So dot container h1. So I'm going to say all the h1 tags inside the container. So that's basically me saying that here. We're going to give it a padding of 10 pixels and then a color of white and a font size of 50 pixels. You can decide what you want here, but yeah, here we go. So basically, as you can see, a padding, it basically gives you space around the elements. In this case, it will look like a margin. But if I show you what it looks like, if I have a border, I have a 1 pixel solid black border. You see the border? There's a 50. You see how there's like a 10 pixel padding? If I have it as a margin here, actually, the spacing would be the same. However, the border would not be. So basically what I'm saying is without the border, if I comment out the border and run it, the margin and padding will be virtually indistinguishable. It will look the same. So I wouldn't even know if it's running or not. But yeah, it will look the same. However, with the border, you can see a little bit difference. And that will come in really handy when we make the button. So we're just gonna use padding for now, and you would see why we're gonna use what the difference between padding and margin is more when we get into the button. So let's just give it 10 pixels, font size of 24 pixels. Of course, you can decide the values for yourself, and yeah, these are not like, yeah, you can have like 50 pixels, 100 pixels if you really wanted to. And yeah, that just has that. Now we get into styling the button. So dot container button. So dot container, we're saying cut container and all the button elements inside the container. And notably, I don't have a dot in front of the button because it's not a class. That's just the element. And I'm just gonna give it a background color of the background color of this. So let's see what color this is. Let's just select that. So it's 3B. Of course, you can choose which one you like, RGB or hex code. And yeah, that's just 2 ways of identifying colors for computers. And let's just have the hex code there. And let's see how this looks. Yeah, so that's what it looks like. And that does not look that good either. So we're just gonna give it a width of 400 pixels. And that's what it looks like now. That still doesn't look good. And here's where margins and paddings come in really important. So if we go margin top 50 pixels, this is what it would look like. However, if we go padding top, oops, this is what it will look like. And as you can see, we do not want padding here. We want margins. So we're just going to go for a margin top of 50 pixels. Now that looks good. And as you can see, there's not enough space between the text and the top and the bottom of the thing. So here is where we would actually use padding. And paddings work a little bit like margins, as in this is top, this is right, this is bottom, this is left. So this is top, this is right. So basically, this is basically a clockwise position of how much space is between each, if that makes sense. So as you can see, 10 pixels on top, 10 pixels on the bottom. If I go 50 pixels, you wouldn't notice it because I have a width. Let's actually remove the width right now. And as you can see, so if I go 500 pixels here, which might go off the screen and make it look really bad. Yeah, it would have 500 pixels here. But I'm gonna have 0 pixels because it goes top, right, bottom, left. There we go. Let's just let's actually Control Z here. Just have the thing back. Okay, that looks good. And there's a border around it, and we don't want the border in this case. Let's just go border none. And I have to speed up because we only have 3 minutes left. Border none. Let's give it a color of white. Of course, you can go. It's FFF. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you can go hex code for the colors too, but we're just gonna use white because it's built in. The white, and it doesn't. The font is a little bit too small. Let's just do font size 24 pixels. As you can see, the font is really it's not thick, if you know what I mean. Imagine Arial bold, Arial regular. So let's just make it Arial bold. So basically we go font weight, and you can go values here. So we can go 600 here. Let's see what this looks like. As you can see, the font becomes thicker, and you can go like 400, 500, 600, etc. That basically changes the font weight. Let's just have a font weight of 600 actually. And let's have a border radius of 25 pixels. Let's stick with pixels instead of using rem or m. And that, so basically a border radius makes it round. And if you want to have a circle, you actually go 50%. And that kind of makes, well, this is an oval because we have width of 400 pixels. And yeah, however, if you want a circle, you just go 50% and make sure the height and width are the same. So yeah, we're kind of done. We're done with this. And I guess I'll go back to the slideshow to finish off the workshop. So I would like to credit W3 Schools, and this is a great resource for when you want to learn like coding. Oops, nice roll. This is a really good resource for when you want to learn anything when it comes to coding. As you can see here, if you go to tutorials, you have HTML, CSS, Python, Java, C++, C#, R, Kotlin. I would recommend Python. You have JavaScript. You have server-side stuff like MySQL, SQL, PHP, Node, Raspberry Pi. I want to learn Raspberry Pi. Yeah, and you have a few certificates which you can get in XML. This is all free, by the way, for most of the stuff. I'm pretty sure you need to pay a little bit to get some certificates, but this is all free, and you can just click on this and you can go through the thing. And yeah, I would really recommend this if you want to pursue learn more about this. This is SQL. You have Python. And yeah, I would really recommend going to the website if you want to learn more. And it's 3:59. So thank you so much for watching. Oh, right on time. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for for watching and for participating in the workshop.